Prasanna sir. Prasanna sir.
Yes, ma'am.
You
Yeah.
can start the session, sir. The recording is on.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, all of you. I think I've introduced myself in the chat window. So I'm Dr. Prasanna Kumar. As far as this subject, theory of computation is concerned, I'm going to brief you and explain the concepts that are present in Unit 5. So as far as Unit 5 is concerned, we are going to discuss about a few things on decidability and undecidability. Okay. So I'll just start presenting my screen. Yeah. Okay. So I hope my screen is visible, right? One can unmute and tell me. I can't see your chat. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we'll start the fifth unit, but before going into the concepts that are present in Unit 5, I'd like to introduce or I'd like to review whatever you have studied in the first 4 units. Okay. So actually this subject area of computation is based on Chomsky hierarchy. So we have different type of languages, and based on the different type of languages, we have different type of grammar. Okay. So for each grammar, we had some mixture. So coming to the innermost or the very small set of language, we called that as regular languages, where it had a grammar called as regular grammar. So we discussed about the finite automata, that is non-deterministic as well as deterministic finite automata for this regular grammar, right? So can anyone tell me about what are the operators that are present in regular grammar? Yeah, one can unmute and tell me what are the operators that are present in regular grammar. Maybe in Unit 1 you might have studied. Okay, I don't know why no one is answering what are the three operators that are present. At least I'm giving a clue that there are three operators in regular grammar. Can at least now you tell me what are the three operators that are present in regular grammar? Okay. Maybe in the chat window, I don't know whether you have given the answer, but there are three operators. One is union, concatenation, and we have the third one, which is nothing but clean closure. So a small variation of clean closure, we had like positive closure. So coming to the second class of machines which we discussed was push down automata. So push down automata is concerned, or it can be designed for languages like context free languages, CFL, and the grammar associated with context free languages, we call it as context free grammar, CFG, right? Okay. So I'll repeat again. So regular languages, we had regular grammar, which had got three operators. One is union, concatenation, and plain closure. Okay, coming to the next part, there is a second class of machines. It's nothing but the context-free languages, and a push-down automata is used to what is it? Represent a context-free language. Coming to the third class of machines, which you might have studied, is the Turing machine. So the Turing machine is used for recursive languages, right? Okay. Now, coming to the difference between the three machines, can you differentiate what is the difference between a finite automata and a push-down automata? You can even type in your chat window. I think I can see. What is the difference between finite automata and push-down automata? Okay, I want the class to be a little bit interactive. Please answer.
So push down requires a stack to store something, whereas finite automata doesn't store any stack.
Finite automata?
In finite, there is no need of memory, sir. But in
Yeah,
push
very
down,
good. Okay, so yeah, good. Actually, there is no memory. It's not that no need of memory. There is no memory in finite automata. Let it be either deterministic finite automata or non-deterministic finite automata. Okay. Now, what about push-down automata?
it has a memory in the form of stack,
Okay.
and it is used to remember the previous entries, like previous data entries, so that it
Yeah.
can. That's all.
Yeah, good. So it has got memory, and the memory is in the form of stack here, right? Okay, and Nandini Sindhuja has answered like finite automata has got 7 tuples. Are you sure? Pushdown automata has 5 tuples, and pushdown automata has the stack. Okay. So I accept two statements from her that PDA has got 5 tuples and PDA has got a stack, but finite automata has only 5 tuples, right? Only a Turing machine and PDA has 7 tuples. I think even PDA has 7 tuples. So two statements is wrong. So PDA has a stack memory. That's okay. Fine. Good. Now, what is the difference? What makes the push-down automata more powerful than a finite automata in the sense the little bit of memory? But that memory is also not so much what is it proficient. Why? Because it's in the form of a stack, so which has very much what is it limited capabilities. That is, you know that it is a data structure where the operations can be performed at only one end. Okay, only push and pop operations can be performed. So it is very much limited over there. And what about the last machine that you discussed, the Turing machine? What about the Turing machine? So a Turing machine has got memory. Do you accept, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what is the form of memory it has got? Turing machine has got memory. What is the form of that? Is it in the form of a stack or queue or something like that? Okay. So it's not either a stack or queue. Yeah, someone has unmuted. Can you proceed?
I guess in the form of queue, because we use tape in that.
Yeah, so we use the magnetic tape. I think most of you might have seen what is a magnetic tape, something like that. And the tape is considered to be, what is the amount of memory available? Can you tell me in terms of megabytes or kilobytes or gigabytes, something like that? Okay. So the amount of memory in the what is it, the Turing machine is considered to be infinite. That is, we can't say that amount of memory and all. Okay. So coming to this class of automata, probably I think a few of them are out of bound to you. But I think the first column which states about a non-deterministic and deterministic finite state machine, and it recognizes a language class of language called as regular languages. So, sorry. So here, in the regular languages, as I told you, we have three operators. Okay. So one is represented by dot, which represents the concatenation. Another one is plus, which represents union. And we have, sorry, okay, something like the asterisk. So we have the third one, which is the asterisk, which we called it as clean closure. Okay, so this is something that resembles like loop, right? So you might have studied about what is Thompson construction and how these three operators can be represented in a finite automata. So this can be either represented by using deterministic or non-deterministic finite automata. And the main characteristic of this is it has got no memory. That is, it cannot remember whatever has been already done by that. It cannot remember the previous state. So the next class of machines, we can club these two together. So which is nothing but a push down automata. One is a deterministic push down automata and another one is a normal push down automata. So push down automata has got memory, and that memory is in the form of stack. Okay. So actually stack has got only two operations. One is push and another one is pop. So it has got its own limitation. Okay. So but we can say that push down automata is somewhat powerful when compared with that of a what is it, finite state machine. Why? Because it has got some memory. So it can perform more operations than a finite state machine. And coming to this one, I think this is not in Anna University syllabus, that is linear bounded automation, which takes care of a type of languages called as context sensitive languages. So this is nothing but it's what is it? The plural is linear bounded automaton and the singular is linear bounded automaton. So it is a restricted form of Turing machine. Okay, it is see, you should not compare that with that of PDA, but it is a restricted form of a Turing machine. So normally this has to be compared with each other. LBA and a Turing machine can be compared. So what is the difference between this linear bounded automaton and the Turing machine? So it is to put in a single word, we can call this as a non-deterministic Turing machine. This LBA is nothing but a non-deterministic Turing machine. Just for your understanding, I am saying this, but anyway, this is not in our scope. Okay. Next, the last class of machines which we discussed is the Turing machine. So Turing machine has got 7 tuples, which will I think you might have discussed, but anyway, I'll like to review that. So it consists of an infinite length tape, which are divided into cells on which the input is given. So it consists of a head which reads input that is present in the state. So we have a state register. And apart from this, I think you might have studied one deterministic that is finite automata. And then, sorry, I think, yeah, DPDA you might have studied, and PDA you might have studied. LBA is not in your syllabus, and Turing machine you might have studied. So all these things are out of scope for you, so we'll just ignore this. We'll move on to the next topic. Okay, this is also in terms of power, which one is the most powerful and which one has got the least power. Okay, so here you can see that the deterministic finite automata has got the least power. Okay. So DFA and NFA has got the same power. So, but we can say that somewhat the DFA is weaker when compared with NFA. But both have the same power in terms of that. Okay, next one we have push-down automata. So as I told you, there are 2 types. One is deterministic one, and another one is non-deterministic one. So the next one is linear bounded automata. Linear bounded automata is similar to a what is it, a Turing machine. And coming to that, we have deterministic push-down automata with 2 push-down states, etc. Don't confuse much. So we'll just go for this one. Okay, which is of our great interest. So a Turing machine has got the highest power. You can see that, but there are different types of Turing machine, which is above the scope of our syllabus. So the Turing machine has got the highest scope. So coming to this, whatever we have discussed in our subject, the first one, which has got the least power, is a finite automata. Second one is a push down automata, which has got which is somewhat powerful when compared with the finite automata. And finally, the last one is the Turing machine, which is the which has got the highest power. Okay. So this is how we can represent that by using the Chomsky thing. Whatever we have studied, the previous diagram was somewhat complex, but this is quite simple. We have only the regular languages, context-free, context-sensitive, and RE languages. So for the RE languages, we have the Turing machine. For this, we have the lower bounded automata LBA. Okay, and for context-free, we have PDA. And for regular languages, we have the finite automata. So this is what you might have studied. I think the context sensitive part you might have not studied. Okay, let's move on. I think enough introduction has been given by me regarding this. So the first one is the grammar called as type 0 grammar. This is Chomsky hierarchy. So the language associated with that type 0 grammar are called as recursively enumerable languages, and the automaton for that is a Turing machine. Coming to type 1 languages, we call it as context sensitive languages, and LBA, which is nothing but a non-deterministic Turing machine, is associated with type 1 or context sensitive languages. So type 2 grammar is associated with context-free languages, and we go for a push-down automata. See, this type 2 language is of great interest to any computer science and engineering student. Why? Because we will be using this type 2 languages in compiler design. Maybe in your next semester you will be studying that. Okay, so this is of very much importance in compiler. Why? Because we use this in parsing. We have top-down parsing and bottom-up parsing. So we use this type 2 grammar or context-free grammar, okay, which is associated with the push-down automata in the next semester. So we just learn this without saying, but in a sense, it's not that you can miss other things. And another, the last type of grammar, we call it as type 3 grammar. So a type 3 grammar is nothing but we call it as a regular grammar, or the language associated by that is a regular language. So we use a finite state automaton where we have the DFA. I'm sorry, my mouse is not working properly, so it gets dragged somewhere. So we have a DFA and NFA. Okay. So these are the two finite state automatons, which is actually this is also great use in compiler design. So it is used in the part of a scanner. Okay. So type 3 is used in scanners in compiler design. Maybe in unit 1 of compiler design you will be studying this. And type 2 grammar is used in the second part, parser. Okay. So you have to be you have to remember these two and don't just try to buy out and pass it away. So you have to remember this type 3 and type 2. Okay. I think the same thing is repeated here. So this is the person who designed the machine, which we call it as a Turing machine. So actually how this Turing machine will look. Okay. So this is the model of a Turing machine. So you can see that tape is there, probably. So you can see tape running through that, and we have a read-write head here, and you can see the counter. Okay. So this is a model of a Turing machine. Still, some universities they use this, right? Okay. This is a hardware model of a Turing machine. Now, what are the 7 tuples of a Turing machine, and what is the meaning for this Turing machine? I'd like to hear from you what is the major difference between Turing machine and a push-down automata. Can anyone explain me? Okay, I'm sorry. I think
Okay, so as per your understanding, a Turing machine has a queue. Okay, as its tape, so PDA has a stack in store. Okay, good. So what else can you say other than this? What is the major difference between a Turing machine and a push-down automaton? Turing machine has symbol 0 and 1. Okay, good. What else? Okay, I think I don't know what's happening here. Suddenly my system got shut down. Okay, but anyway, I'm logged in into my mobile. So, okay, let me explain what is the difference between a Turing machine and a push-down automata. So a push-down automata has got memory in the form of stack. Yeah, we accept that. And in a Turing machine, we have a tape which has got infinite memory. Okay. See, a push-down automata actually cannot compute anything. Okay. I'll repeat again, a push-down automata cannot compute anything. So probably when you studied about push-down automata and some examples related with push-down automata, you might have studied like whether it will accept, what is it, a power n, b power n, languages like a power n, b power n, a power n, b power n, c power n or 2n, something like that. Okay, this is what you might have studied. Okay, whereas you might have not studied or you might have not encountered any push-down automata that can perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So the entire computing that is that we are using today, whatever computer or even your mobile phone, smartphones, etc., it is based on two basic operations. One is addition and another one is subtraction. So Turing machines are the first class of machines. Okay, I'll repeat again, Turing machine or the first class of machines that were able to perform arithmetic operations. So push-down automata was not able, we cannot do any arithmetic operations over there. For example, let there be a very simple function for, let's consider increment, leave addition, increment. So increment in the sense, if the number is 5, it will say it is 6. It is just increment. Okay, one form of addition, I accept that. So if I want to perform an increment or decrement operation, okay, I cannot do that in a push-down automata, whereas the same can be performed by using a Turing machine. I think, I don't know what you have discussed earlier, but maybe you might have discussed about how an increment and decrement operation can be performed by using a Turing machine. Also, you might have discussed about problems on how to design a Turing machine for addition, how to design a Turing machine for subtraction, multiplication. I think division, they are not, I think it's not in the syllabus because it's a little bit complicated. Okay. So I hope you might have seen all these things, addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Okay. Now, coming to our discussion, our earlier discussion, as I told you, a Turing machine can perform arithmetic operations. This is a major difference between the push-down automata and Turing machine. So, whatever computers that we use today, okay, are based on this Turing machine concept only. I'll repeat again, whatever computers that are present now and whatever we are using now are based on this Turing machine only. Okay, so it is of great interest to us. Why? Because it plays a major role, okay, in the design of today's computers. whatever what is it computing we perform, let it be any graphical applications or gaming, anything, it is based on this concept of Turing machine. Okay, so now what is this decidability and what is undecidability? Why? Because unit 5 discusses about these two concepts only, right? So I just want to give an overview of what is the difference between the three class of machines. Why? Because you should be in a position to appreciate the things that can be performed and that cannot be performed by a particular class of machine. So we say that a computer can perform anything today. No, it's not that a computer can do everything. There are few problems which cannot be solved by a computer. Okay, so I'll repeat again, there are few problems that cannot be solved by a computer. So those problems we call it as undecidable problems. Okay, so in to be very short and precise, we can say that undecidable problems are the problems where I cannot find a Turing machine. To put in a very simple term, I'll repeat again, undecidable problems are the problems where I cannot design a Turing machine. Okay, so coming to our discussion back to decidability. So decidability is nothing but, as I told you, I can design a Turing machine for such problems. So that all those problems, I call it as decidable problems, and a decidable problem has got a Turing machine. That is very interesting, right? A decidable problem has got Turing machine. So do you have any doubt in this, whatever I was just explaining to you? If you want, I can clarify. Maybe for 1 or 2 minutes, I'll just pause my class. I didn't teach anything new, but it was just a refresher of what you have already studied. I was just giving the entire overview or a bird's eye view of what you have studied earlier. So if you have any queries, you can ask now. So please be interactive, and it should not be like a one-way class where I'm just talking something and you people not asking anything and not participating. So kindly be participative. So you can ask any queries if you have now. Okay, Sanjay, Charan, no doubt. Swati, clear. Okay. So what about others? Okay. I think my system is off.
I'll start presenting. Okay, there was a small technical issue. Am I clear now? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. I'm sorry, there was some small hiccup here in my system. Okay, so this is what we are discussing about, and now let's go to the concept of decidability. Okay, so if you're having any doubt, I think you can even put it in your chat window. But anyway, let's move on. So another thing is that I'll be explaining about decidability, and if you have any issues, you can stop me. Okay, so that I can explain that to you again. It's not okay. It's not a problem. I don't mind repeating even a number of times, but I just want you people to learn, right? Okay. So what is this? Let's have a consider. Let's consider a problem with answers yes or no. Okay. So examples of this type of answers are, does machine M has got 3 states? I may say whether yes or no for this. If my machine, here a machine does not mean a Turing machine, please mind that, any machine, okay, maybe a NFA, BFA or a PDA has 3 states. So what will be my answer? I may answer either with yes or I may answer with no. It depends upon the count. And is a string W a binary number? Okay, I may say whether yes or no. If it is in binary, I'll say yes, otherwise no. So next one is, does a deterministic finite automata accept any input? Even then I'll say yes or no for this. So coming to the definition of decidability, a problem is decidable if some Turing machine, okay, solves the problem. Okay, here you can see the word decides and solves. Okay, so if I have a Turing machine that can solve a problem, then I can say that that particular problem is decidable. Okay, so all these three are decidable problems, right? Because I can say that by seeing a diagram, whether a particular machine, state diagram or state table, I can say whether the Turing machine or any machine, maybe a PD or a finite automata has got three states or not, yes or no. The Turing machine will say that. So given an input like 0, 1, 1, it will say that yes, it is a binary number. Also, a Turing machine will be capable of computing whether a DFA can accept a particular input. Okay, so these are examples for decidable problems. Now, how to represent this? So a Turing machine that decides the problem, okay, for each instance of the problem, we say that it is decidable. So we have an input problem. It is given as to the Turing machine. The Turing machine will say either yes or it will say no. So this is all about decidability. Now, a machine that decides the problem, if the answer is yes, okay, then halts in a yes state. Okay. See, this is another important word which you have to remember, halting. Okay. So the Turing machine should come to a halt. It should not be without halting or enter into an infinite loop, something like that. So it must halt at one point of time. So you can see that it halts even if the answer is no. Okay. Even if the answer is no, it has to halt. So if the answer is yes, it halts and it is in the yes state. Here yes state represents the final state. Okay. Next one is if the answer is no, that is if it is not able to say that, okay, for the example, the finite automata has got 5 states, then the answer is no, but it has to halt. It has to tell the answer no. It has got more than 5 states, 3 states or less than 3 states, but it has to halt. And quite interesting is that the states may not be final. This is quite interesting. You have to keep this in mind. Okay, I'll explain why. There's a contradiction between two statements. I'll explain this later. Now, as I told you, there are yes states and there are some no states. So, an yes state may include a final state and it may include a non-final state also, some intermediate states. You can see, I think you know how a final state is represented by using a concentric circle, right? Okay, so it may be non-states or, sorry, no states also. Here a no means the answer is no. Okay, see, clearly understand that the Turing machine is decidable. It can say yes or no. So we have a few states which will say yes, and we will have few states in the Turing machine which will say no. Okay, and here this yes or no are halting states. Okay, what is halting? The Turing machine should stop its work. It should not enter into an infinite loop. Okay, so this is more important. The yes and no states are halting states. That is, it has to stop. There is a difference between final state and halting state. I'll repeat again. There is a difference between final state and halting state. So what is a final state? Final state is a state in which the machine will go and rest. Okay. Whereas a halting state means it depends upon the problem. So when that problem is over, the machine will come to an halt. Okay. The machine will stop for that particular problem. Okay, it need not be the acceptance or the final state. Okay. Now, what is the difference between recursive languages and decidable problems? Okay. So, okay, I'm sorry. The decidable problems mean the yes state may not be final state. Please, I think it will be a little bit confusing, but I'll repeat again. There is a difference between final state and halt state. Okay. See, halting state is depending upon a problem, that maybe a particular task in a problem also, I have to say whether the answer is yes or no, and then I have to cut short that problem. But the machine may be running for some other issue. Okay. Whereas the final state is nothing but no further movement of the Turing machine is permitted there, it will come to a halt. Okay. So, a decidable problem, the yes state may not be final state. Why? Because it will say yes and then it will do some other work also. Okay. Now, what are the problems that are undecidable? Okay. So, basically undecidability means there is no Turing machine. That is very much important. Okay. Undecidable means I say that a problem is undecidable if there is no Turing machine for that. I cannot construct a Turing machine for that. We'll see some examples. A classic example is to find a pattern in the granite. Okay, maybe in tiles or granite, something like that. So there may not be always a solution for that. Sometimes the pattern may be formed and many times it may not be there. Okay, so there is no Turing machine that solves all the instances of the problem. See, this is very important. Instance of a problem, it does not mean the entire problem, a particular task. Okay, for other instances, there may have a solution. A simple example for undecidable problem is the membership problem, which I'll explain later, not now. As of now, I'd like to ask you whether you understood what is the difference between decidable and undecidable problem. Please say yes or no. Do you understand what is decidable and undecidable problem?
Yes, sir. Understood.
Yeah. So can you explain what it is? Okay. If there is a Turing machine, then we say that if I can construct a Turing machine for a problem, then we say that it is decidable. If a Turing machine cannot be constructed for a particular instance of a problem, then we say that those problems are undecidable problems. And there is another term which I introduced to you was the two types of states. One is a final state, another one is a halting state. A final state is different from a halting state. Okay. So a final state may be, a final state means the machine will come to a stop there. Whereas a halting state is for a particular problem. There are two types of halting states. One is a yes state and another one is no state. You can see that a yes state can have a final state, and also a no state can have a final state. Also, other nodes can be a part of the halting state. Okay, some intermediate node may also be a part of the halting state. So halting state, there are two types. One is yes, another one is no. Okay, a final state may be a part of yes state as well as no state. Okay, so and in case if the problem is decidable, the yes state may not be the final state, which you have to remember. Okay, fine. So I think let's move on. This is an example for an undecidable problem, the membership problem. So we have a Turing machine and we have a string. So the question here is whether the machine M accepts W or not. That is, whether W belongs to L of M. So where M stands for the machine and L stands for the language of a particular machine. So this is an a membership problem where we cannot say that a particular string, okay, W. I hope you understand this. W represents a string, belongs to a particular language L of M, particular language L of M. So it is a membership problem, and it has got no Turing machine fixed. Okay, design that can be designed. Okay, so the membership problem is undecidable. That is, there are machines M and a string W for which we cannot decide whether the string W belongs to the language L of M. Okay. So we have a proof for this. That is, assume for contradiction. Okay, that membership problem is decidable. So we'll be using proof by contradiction here. Maybe you might have studied proof, different types of proofs earlier. So we'll be using proof by contradiction. We assume that membership problem is decidable. So if it is decidable, then there should be a Turing machine. Let that Turing machine be called as H. So we have a machine M and string is W, the machine has to say yes or no. So what will happen is, if the machine accepts the string W, okay, then it is yes. If the machine rejects W, then it is no. So what happens here is, okay, so if L is RE language, that is recursively enumerable language, and M is the Turing machine that accepts, we'll prove that L is also recursive. Okay. So I'll repeat again, recursively enumerable languages are the languages that are accepted by the Turing machine. Okay. So here we'll prove that L is also recursive if M is a Turing machine that is associated with that language L. Okay. So we can describe a Turing machine that accepts the language L and halts on the any input. As I told you, it should halt. It should not enter into an infinite loop. Okay. So here the Turing machine that accepts L and halts on any input. So W is a string. Okay. So what will happen here is, it will accept the string or it will reject the string. Okay. What is the difference between this diagram and the diagram that we discussed earlier? So I'll just go back here. Okay. Here, what will happen if the output is yes? Okay. M accepts string W. If the output is no, then M rejects the string W. Okay, we are nowhere talking as a language L here. We are discussing about the acceptance of the string W, but we don't know whether it is a member of L, member of that particular language L. So coming to this diagram, okay, what happens here is, the Turing machine accepts the language L and halts on any input W. So W is the string here. Okay. So here you see that we have an outermost box, another one machine. Okay. And within that machine, we have this particular class of machine. We have two machines here. So this particular machine M accepts W. Okay. So this is the outermost Turing machine H. So we have two machines here. This block represents one machine, and this rectangle represents the another machine embedded in the outermost Turing machine. So in this Turing machine here, we have a machine M that accepts the string W. So if it is yes, the string is accepted, which means that it accepts that particular, that we say that it is a, it belongs to that language. And here, if it is no, it rejects that W. Okay. So as of today is concerned, okay, today's class is concerned, I think it will be a little bit confusing to you all. Why? Because it's a pure theoretical part. We don't have any problems here. Okay, don't worry. As time progresses, you will be very clear in what is decidability and what is undecidability, and particularly with reference to this problem, what is it? Membership problem. Okay, so don't worry if you're not understanding now. As time progresses, maybe in another 1 or 2 classes, it will be very clear to you. So if this language L is recursive, okay, and if L is some language choose arbitrarily, every RE language is also recursive. Okay. So, but there are some RE languages that are not recursive. So what is this RE language? What is this recursive languages? I think you might have got an introduction about RE languages. So RE languages are the class of languages that are accepted by the Turing machine. So what is this recursive languages? So see, recursive languages or languages, okay, which is a part of RE languages, but we cannot say that it is a subset of that, something like that. Okay, here we have a contradiction. That is, we are just going into this membership function, and we have a contradiction here. So we say that the membership problem is undecidable. Okay, so I'll maybe we'll just discuss some more examples for this, and so that you'll be understanding about undecidability in a clear manner. Okay, so we have a problem called as a halting problem. So what is this halting problem? It is very similar to that of the membership problem. So we have a Turing machine M, we have a string W. The question here is that does the Turing machine halt on the input W? Okay, this is called as the halting problem. So the halting problem is also undecidable. Okay, So why we say that the halting problem is undecidable? Also, we go for the same proof by contradiction here. We assume that the halting problem is decidable first. We assume that the halting problem is decidable. Okay. So, but actually it is undecidable. But since for proof by contradiction, we use this here. Coming to this next part, let's have a Turing machine, and that machine we called as H. Okay. So we have some machine M and input string W. Okay. And we have two answers. One is either yes or no. Okay. So by contradiction, we assume that there exists a Turing machine H that can solve this problem. So what it has to do, this machine M, okay, not the Turing machine, this particular machine M must halt on input W. Okay. When the answer is yes, by this Turing machine. Okay. See, here there are two types of machine. One is the Turing machine H designed for another machine M. Okay, so what does the Turing machine say? The Turing machine has to say whether M will halt on the input W. Please listen carefully. I'll repeat again. Okay. Here we consider two machines. One is the Turing machine H and another machine M. Okay. What is the work of the Turing machine? It has to decide if the machine M. So here is the machine M. If the machine M will come to a halt on this input string W. Who will decide that? The Turing machine has to decide that. Okay. So this particular machine has to say whether this machine will come to a halt or not. Okay. So in the previous slide, we assumed that halting problem is decidable, which means that I say that, okay, yeah, there is a machine. I can build a Turing machine which can identify that a particular machine M, okay, a Turing machine M, okay, which will decide if another machine, I can decide a Turing machine H, which will decide whether this machine M can come to a halt or not. Okay, this is the assumption. Okay, so here if it is a no, then this M does not halt on W. This M does not halt. Who has to say whether it is correct or not? This H has to say. Okay, so this is by assumption that we can do this. But let's see what will happen actually. So we have to construct a Turing machine H for this. That is our goal, right? So what is the input to this Turing machine? It will have one machine M, okay, and another string W. So it will have some encoding of M. I think you might have studied in our 4th unit. I saw that in the syllabus, programming techniques of Turing machine. So in that, I hope you might have studied about how to encode a Turing machine. Okay, so if not, I don't know because I didn't see the previous content. So I assume that encoding of Turing machine has already done. So WM is the encoded form of this machine M and W is the input. So these two are given to the Turing machine H. Okay, so these two are given here and the machine has to say whether it is yes or no. Okay, the Turing machine has to say yes or no whether this machine M will accept the string W. Now, what we do is we design or we construct another machine called as H dash. Okay, so what it will do is if H returns yes, then loop forever. In the sense it will enter into a non-halt state. Whereas if this H returns a no, then let the machine halt. Okay, so what is this? This is with respect to